With the democratic parties controlling most of the west of Europe and the communists controlling the east, it set the stage for the true opening of the Cold War in the south-east of Europe in 1946 in Greece. Now, during World War II, Greece had been invaded by Italy near the start of the war in hopes of an easy victory. Instead, the Italians were overwhelmed by the Greek army. The situation was only remedied by the Germans supporting an Italian re-invasion. And even though the Greek army was then fairly quickly defeated, there were substantial Italian losses, and it diverted resources away from Germany's invasion of Russia. However, no sooner had the Greek army been defeated than resistance groups started to conduct partisan raids against the Italian, German and Bulgarian occupying forces. The Axis forces, most notably the Germans, responded with reprisals and the seizing of food, which led to a widespread famine. The Greek resistance was made up of several different groups, the major one being the Communist Greek People's Liberation Army, who, though they directed most of their attacks against the invaders, there was some occasional infighting. In 1944, with the Italian surrender, the German forces pulling out to avoid being trapped in Greece by the advancing Russians, the Greeks were poised to retake control of their own country. But conflict escalated between the anti-communist National Republican Greek League and the Greek People's Liberation Army, who saw each other as much of the enemy as the now soon-to-be defeated Germans. Under instruction from the Russians, the communists were told not to take over control because it might disrupt the alliance against Germany with the Allies. The British soon arrived in an attempt to secure the country and form a national unity government, but fighting broke out fairly quickly between the British forces and the communists. And though the fighting was over relatively quickly, it did result in several thousand deaths, and World War II still going on didn't bode well for the future of Greece. There followed an attempt at Greek unity with a referendum on the monarchy and elections. The violence continued between the Greek groups, but at a much lower level. All this, however, changed in 1946, when, as the result of the general election, put the National Republican Greek League in power rather than the communists. The communists claimed that the election was rigged, and after a minor incident formed the Democratic Army of Greece in an attempt to restore what they regarded as Greece's lost democracy. Full-scale civil war soon resulted, with the communists using guerrilla tactics in the northern, mountainous regions of Greece, receiving support from across the border in Yugoslavia from Tito, and the nationalists initially being supported by the British. However, as the conflict escalated from guerrilla warfare to a more conventional one, Britain's now meagre resources were overtaxed, and they asked the Americans for support. The Americans gave them support in what's now known as the Truman Doctrine. Opposing Soviet communist expansion at the time was limited to Greece and Turkey, but it would later be a key underlying factor in the Cold War. With heavier weapons and a large amount of money now being supplied to the nationalists, along with a policy of moving the rural civilians away from the fighting, and managed to deny the safe grounds for the communists with their local support base. When a split occurred between Tito in Yugoslavia and Stalin in Russia, the communists in Greece had to decide whether to side with Stalin or Tito. In choosing the more powerful Stalin, who wanted an end to the conflict, they lost supplies coming across the border with Yugoslavia. With infighting breaking out between the communists as to whether they should have sided with Tito, the communists lost any chance of winning the civil war. In 1949, the war was over and the nationalists had won, but the country was ruined. The civil war had probably caused more devastation than the Axis occupation. It would take another decade before Greece could recover its strength, and by that time the Cold War moved on to other areas.